Myself, Dr. K.L. Bansal, Professor, Department of Computer Science. I will talk on database management system. Database management system is a collection of programs that enables users to create and maintain a database. It is a general purpose software system that facilitates the process of defining, constructing, manipulating and sharing databases among various users and applications. It acts as an interface between database and users. So under the process of defining is specifying the types of data, structures and constraints of the data to be stored in the database. Constructing the database is the process of storing the data on some storage medium that is controlled by the database management system. Whereas manipulating a database includes functions such as querying the database to retrieve some specific data, updating the database, and generating reports from the data. Sharing a database allows multiple users and programs to access the database simultaneously. So next we are talking about this file processing system. In traditional file processing system, each department has its own set of applications and its own files designed specifically for those applications. The department sets the policies or standards for the format and maintenance of its files. Computer readable data in file system are kept in files stored on magnetic tapes or disk. So before this database approach came into existence, there was a traditional file processing system where for each application we have to develop the program, and for that program we have to have the dedicated data file which will be used by that application program. So for different applications programs we have to maintain the different data files, those dedicated for those applications. So there was some limitation of this file system approach. First is the data redundancy, means a repetition of the same data in different files. So if we are performing the different, we are using the different application programs at different locations, so we have to maintain the different data files at dedicated for those applications. So we are storing the same data again and again, which leads to the data redundancy in case of a traditional file system approach. Second limitation is data inconsistency. When same data is managed differently in different places, leads to data inconsistency. Because if we are making change or updating the data at one level and that change is not reflected at the other level, that type of problem will lead to the data inconsistency. Third is data dependence. Data are stored in a specific format or structure in a file. If the structure or format is changed, all the existing application programs accessing that file also need to change. What is a database? A database is an organized collection of structured information or data typically stored electronically in a computer system. A database is usually controlled by a database management system. Together, the data and the database management system, along with the applications that are associated with them, are referred to as a database system, often shortened to just database. Data within the most common types of databases in operation today is typically modeled in rows and columns in a series of tables to make processing and data querying efficient. The data can then be easily accessed, managed, modified, updated, controlled, and organized. So, database is a collection of related data. By data we mean known facts that can be recorded and that have implicit meanings. A database represents some aspects of the real world. A database is a logically coherent collection of data with some inherent meaning. Database is designed, built, and populated with data for a specific purpose. It has an intended group of users and some preconceived applications in which these users are interested. Characteristics of database approach: self-describing nature of a database system. Second is insulation between programs and data abstraction. Support of multiple views of the data, sharing of data and multi-user transaction processing. A fundamental characteristics of the database approach is that the database system contains not only the database itself, but also a complete definition or description of the database structures and constraints. In a traditional file processing, data definition is typically part of the application programs. Second characteristics is the insulation between programs and data abstraction. Means there is a main characteristics of this database approach is a program data independence. This is due to the three-level architecture of the database management system, where program and data are at different levels. If you are making change at one level, if you are making the change at the database level, that change should not affect the application programs. Or if you are increasing or decreasing the application programs, that change should not affect the database. So this is known as the program data independence. This is possible with the help of the three-level architecture, where first is the physical level, where the program and data is stored on some storage medium. Second is the logical or conceptual view, where database is maintained. And third is the application, where all the application programs are stored which are performed on the database. So if you are updating or deleting, or if you are making change at the database level, that change will not affect the application program area. Or if you are increasing the applications programs, that change should not affect the database or the conceptual view or at the logical level, where database is maintained. Third is the support of multiple views of the data. Because we are associating the different applications on the same database. So each application will access a part of the data in the database. So different applications has the access for a different small part of the data. So it supports the multiple view of the data. Sharing of data and multi-user transaction processing, because you are performing the different applications on the same database. So we are sharing the database, and the different application program are sharing the database. So these are the main characteristics of the database approach over the traditional file processing approach. Advantages of DBMS approach. First is the controlling redundancy. In case of database approach, whole of the data is stored at one location. If you are updating or deleting the data, that you are storing the data at one location. So as we have discussed in the traditional file processing approach, where we have to store the same data at different location. So here, by storing the data at one location, we are controlling the redundancy. Redundancy of the data can be controlled with the help of this DBMS approach. And restricting unauthorized access, as we know, there is a database administrator who has control on the whole of the database. So unauthorized access can be avoided in case of a DBMS approach. It also provides backup and recovery, providing multiple user interface, enforcing integrity constraints. So these are some of the advantages of the database management system approach over the traditional programming file processing approach. So now we will talk about what is data. Data is viewed as a collection of disconnected facts. It is stored representation of meaningful objects and events. There are three types of data: structured data, unstructured data, and semi-structured data. So example has been given. Structured data is number, text, dates, etc. These come under the category of structured data. Images, video, etc. come under the unstructured data. And email, web pages, etc. come under the category of semi-structured data, which is a combination of structured and unstructured data. What is a data model? A data model is a collection of concepts, and these concepts are used to describe the structure of the database. By the structure of the database, we mean data types, relationships, and constraints that should hold for the data. So we can take the example of this car. A data model may specify that the data element representing a car be composed of a number of other elements, which in turn represent the color, size, and its owner. So mainly the concept provided by the data model will be used to describe the structure of the database. A database model is a type of data model that determines the logical structure of the database. It determines in which manner data can be stored, organized, and manipulated. The most popular example of a database model is the relational model, which uses a table-based format. Basically, these tables are known as a relation, which looks like a table and has row and column. So data is stored in a relation. Entity relationship model, it is the first step of designing to give the flow for a concept. It is the data flow diagram requirement of an organization. An entity relationship model describes the structure of a database with the help of a diagram, which is known as entity relationship diagram. It is a high-level data model diagram that defines the conceptual view of the database. It represents database as a graphical drawing of entities and attributes and relationships among those entities. The component of this entity relationship model, first component is entity. An entity may be an object with physical existence, or it may be an object with a conceptual existence. For example, person, car, which can be come under the category of physical existence. A university course, a job, etc. come under the category of conceptual existence. As we know, when we go for the creation of database, the data is existing in the real world. So, first step for creation of database is to identify the data which is existing in the real world. So these are the concepts given by the database approach. With the help of these concepts, we can identify the data and record in the database. So first concept is the entity. All these entities have some attributes or properties that give them their identity. For example, students have their name, address, contact number, etc. So the student entity can record the data of thousands of the students. The attribute value that describe each entity becomes a major part of the data stored in the database. Entities are represented by means of their properties or by their characteristics called attributes. All attributes have values. For example, a student entity may have name, class, and age as attributes. There exists a domain or range of values that can be assigned to attributes. Just we can take the example of employee. The range of values of their age can be between 18 and 60. So whenever you will assign the value to the attribute age, that should lie between the range 18 years to 16 years. A student's name cannot be a numeric value, it has to be alphabetic. a student says cannot be negative, etc. Entity and attribute representation. Once we have identified the different entities or their attributes, then we have to draw the entity relationship diagram, where we have to show how these entities are connected with each other. So rectangle is used to represent the entity in the diagram, whereas oval structure will be used for representing the attributes of the entity. In this diagram here, name attribute is a composite attribute, as it is composed of two attributes, first name and last name. Social security number is a primary key attribute. Primary key means the value of this attribute will be unique, which will be used for identification of a record in a relation. Age is a derived attribute, as it can be derived from birth date attribute. Hobbies is a multi-valued attribute, as it can contain multiple hobbies of a person. Relationships in a DBMS. Our relationships in a DBMS is primarily the way two or more data sets are linked. Relationships allow the data sets to share and store the data in separate tables. So there are three types of the relationship: one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. Here in this diagram, where a record in one entity is associated with exactly one record in another entity. You can take the example of this country. Each country has exactly one capital city. Each capital city is the capital of exactly one country. One-to-many relationship is a relationship where a record in one entity is associated with multiple records in other entity. And in many-to-many relationship, where each record in one entity is associated with multiple records in other entity, and vice versa. And we have taken the example of the student courses. A particular student may enroll oneself to more than one course, while a course may have more than one student. Thank you.